tale that could easily be a plot in Bridgerton, Downton Abbey, or perhaps even Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman. This epic story takes us through the life of a national hero, a grieving widow, alongside a bitter sibling rivalry, allegations of undue influence, and a trust that might see a son inherit absolutely nothing from his late father. This is Money, Crimes and Human Minds, and today we are delving into the depths of the British legal system, where the saga will ultimately play out. This story begins with Sir Stirling Moss, one of Britain's most celebrated racing drivers. In fact, far more than just a driver, he was a national treasure. He won many of the races he entered, despite the risks of this dangerous sport before the days of PPE and health and safety, until his racing career ended in a horrific crash at Goodwood in 1962 that left him in a coma for a month. But his greatest victory, many said, was his 40-year-long marriage to Lady Susie Moss. They were inseparable in life and business. Lady Susie was a huge part of building their life, fortune and success together. In fact, he was once quoted as saying, "I simply could not operate without Susie." They also had a son together, Elliot, who's now in his mid-40s. Sir Stirling was divorced twice before his final marriage to Lady Susie, one of which resulted in a daughter, Alison, with his second wife. Now, after Sir Stirling fell ill in 2016, Susie never left his bedside, and sadly he passed away on Easter Sunday 2020 at the age of 90. Lady Susie passed away 3 years later in March 2023 at the age of 69. Now, when Sir Stirling died, he left his £22 million estate to his wife Susie. However, when she died in 2023, the estate had grown to roughly £27.8 million, including their treasured gadget-filled Mayfair home and priceless racing artefacts. And this is where the conflict begins. You see, 18 years before he died, thereabouts, back in 2002, Sir Stirling had written a will that would have seen his son Elliot inherit 75% of his estate, whilst Alison received the other 25%. However, ultimately, his money was left to Lady Susie, who in turn, during the 3-year period before she passed away, wrote a will of her own. This will placed the entire estate into a discretionary trust. Now, this is not unheard of. Lots of people use these kinds of trusts to give additional oversight, give more control for the generations to come, or even to enhance tax efficiency in some cases. However, the trustees have a hugely important role to play in trusts of this kind. They are essentially the legal owners of the trust, and they've got full ability to manage the assets within, including how they're invested and to what extent beneficiaries can inherit or access the funds. This is a very key point in a discretionary trust. You see, beneficiaries don't have an automatic right to income or capital. It is the trustees who have full discretion to decide who gets what and when. Now, Lady Susie selected 2 trustees to manage and distribute funds from the trust. One was Alison Bradley, so that's Sir Stirling's daughter from a previous marriage, Lady Susie's stepdaughter. And the other was Richard Frankel, a close family friend and fellow classic car enthusiast. Now, he was not a recent addition into the equation. He was a long-time friend of the family for decades. And following Sir Stirling's death in 2020, it was Frankel who was entrusted to be appointed as the director of the family company, Stirling Moss Limited. And that was on December the 11th, 2020. He held that position until he resigned on the 1st of October 2024. So whilst he has not been formally brought to court in this case, and importantly, he does not stand to benefit personally from the will, according to Elliot, he is the catalyst who allegedly encouraged Lady Susie to distrust her own son. Now, from the outside, he might be perceived nothing more than a devoted friend with a shared passion and of whom was entrusted to help manage the business's interests in the past and has simply been added as a trustee to do this again. However, their only biological son, Elliot, was not appointed as a trustee and therefore has no expressed right or ability to access any of this legacy unless the two trustees, Frankel and his half-sister, say so. Now, this is a dramatic change to the original will structure from 20 years before. And now Elliot Moss is openly contesting his mother's 2022 will in the High Court. The court documents reveal some deeply personal accusations that have shocked the motorsport community, and his legal team are arguing the validity of the will on a few key points, starting with undue influence. Elliot alleges that his mum was poisoned against him by a third party, allegedly Richard Frankel, one of the trustees, to say that he shouldn't benefit. In English law, the basic idea is that if A poisons the testator's mind against B by casting dishonest dispersions on his character, then the will is liable to be set aside, known as fraudulent calumny. Now, this is interesting, and as one expert noted, fraudulent calumny is like the poisoning of the mind. It's much more subtle than undue influence. The victim believes they are making their own choice, but that choice is built on a foundation of lies. This is notoriously difficult to prove. It requires evidence of deliberate, dishonest or reckless lies told to a testator, i.e. someone making a will, to poison their mind. But as with us all, such conversations often occur privately, not as part of public record. Furthermore, in the court papers, there are issues raised about mental capacity. Elliot claims that Lady Susie suffered from profound grief, depression and alcohol dependency after her husband's death, which he argues caused brain damage and left her without the capacity to sign the new will. He alleges it impaired her judgments, decision-making, and that she might not have been able to understand the implications of the estate planning. Now, she was quoted in saying, after her late husband's death, "He was my raison d'etre, my best friend, the reason I went to sleep at night and got up in the morning. And both those things aren't quite so easy now." Court reports suggest she carried Stirling's ashes in a silver urn, even allegedly dabbing them on her skin like perfume. They also indicate that Elliot claims that Frankel continued to supply Lady Susie with alcohol despite her alleged struggles with dependency. So was Lady Susie so vulnerable that those close to her could reshape her view of her only son's character? Or were her newly appointed trustees simply acting as trusted companions in a period of trauma and grief, trying their best to preserve and protect the family legacy and adhere to her wishes? Now, beyond the cash, there are also disputes about iconic racing memorabilia, the hypothetical crown jewels in this case. Elliot has accused his mother's estate of robbing him of items with massive sentimental and commercial value, including famous trophies and a missing crash helmet, invaluable and irreplaceable. These things went missing before her death. Now, in her defence, Alison Bradley has vigorously denied all these allegations, maintaining that Lady Susie was of sound mind and that the 2022 will accurately reflected her wishes. In her legal findings, according to news reports, they paint a very different family picture. She asserts that Lady Susie was of sound mind, capable of making reasoned decisions, and that their relationship was not remote, that they had contact and communication in the months before the will was made. She also suggests that Elliot's relationship with his parents at times were strained and hostile, undermining claims that he was the natural inheritor by simple love or loyalty. Which all begs the question, was Alison the dutiful caregiver, earning her trust and the right to manage the estate by being loyal and dependable? Or was she simply in the right place at the right time for a vulnerable, grieving lady to be influenced and gain control of the estate? Well, as of February 2026, the case is still going through High Court. It serves as a tragic postscript to the life of a man who was known for his sportsmanship and fair play on and off the track. Now, in order to be successful, Elliot will have to prove that Lady Susie lacked the capacity at the time she signed. Making eccentric decisions that others may feel are unwise does not prove incapacity. He'll also have to prove that someone coerced her against her wishes. And fraudulent calumny is an even rarer and higher bar of proof, having to prove without doubt that lies were told about him to his mother, knowing they were false specifically to get him written out of his inheritance. Now, as the High Court fight continues, here are some central themes for you to consider. Was this a son robbed of his rightful inheritance? Perhaps Lady Susie and her advisors were in fear of the known house money effect. This is where inherited money is often viewed as free money rather than earned wealth. This can lead to frivolous spending, reckless use, risky investments, and even the rapid depletion of assets. Therefore, the trust could be part of preserving and protecting the estate. Or is this just a case of a middle-aged man with an inflated sense of entitlement, unable to agree with his mother's final choices? Perhaps the behaviour of someone caught in the endowment effect, the known bias that inheritors often feel that assets, particularly family homes or treasured belongings, should already belong to them even before they are formally passed down. Was Lady Susie a victim of manipulation, or just a grieving lady exercising her own preferences and choices? It's interesting that she chose to add her stepdaughter as a trustee, as opposed to her own biological son, which could well speak to their relationship. We know of the gilding the lily effect, in which adult children sometimes overvalue the strength of their relationship with a parent, believing that their right to the money is stronger than it actually is. Courts often find that adult children who are estranged or have a strained relationship sometimes still feel a very profound and, in some cases, legally acceptable entitlement to their inheritance. So was the trust set up to shield future mismanagement, or as a tool to deliberately erase Elliot's legacy entitlement? And consider this: should the UK adopt the French system, in which children are protected heirs and automatically inherit a mandatory minimum portion of their parents' estate regardless of a will? You legally cannot disinherit children under French law. What a different outcome that would be in this case. Well, there's no Lady Whistledown here. There's only perceived evidence, different interpretations, and human behaviour and emotion under scrutiny, and a court hearing yet to be concluded. We'll be watching closely. I'm Zoe Taylor, and this is Money, Crimes and Human Minds. We would love to know what you think in the comments. Please like and subscribe. We have new episodes weekly and our first Friday special commentary every month too.